So happy to have each of you here to really lean into a quick conversation on feedback. So here at Feedback Mentality, really my goal is to just have courageous conversations about feedback. Feedback is something we typically keep to ourselves and really think about in private. But I hope to just open the dialogue and create space for us to talk about something that is truly, truly impactful in our lives. So thank you guys for joining me today. I see a lot of wonderful faces. It is so great to see all of you. Feel free to just type where you are today. Where are you sitting? What state are you in? And if you have any questions about feedback, feel free to put them in the chat, and I will try my best to address them. Thank you, Bishwani, for joining. Stay just as long as you can, but thanks for showing up. All right, so let's jump right into this, guys, because I know your time is limited. So today, my goal is to talk about feedback hoarding. So let me ask you this question for the group. Would you prefer that if someone had feedback for you, that they'd either hold on to it or keep it? I mean, be honest. What do you prefer? Do you prefer people to give you feedback regardless of the topic, or would you really just prefer that they keep it to themselves? I want you to just think about that for a moment. Feedback is really important. I call it information. It's information given in our past, information about our past given in our present so that it can impact our future. But sometimes we don't get all of the feedback that could really help us. So that's why tonight I want to talk about feedback hoarding. And feedback hoarding is simply the process of intentionally withholding feedback from others. Have you ever done that? I mean, let's be honest, guys. Have you ever had feedback for someone, but you decided not to share it? I mean, I think we've all done it. But let's really reflect on why that is. Why is it that we understand the power of feedback and its ability to help transform and impact somebody's life, but sometimes we hoard it. We hold on to it. Not only do we just hold on to it, but we keep it, sometimes even forever. Now, I don't know if you've seen that show, Hoarders, but some of us are just like the show. We collect and store a lot of things and not willing to really evaluate and be intentional about what we share. When it comes to feedback, I think we have a social and ethical responsibility to be able to share information with others. Let's be honest, we know we all have blind spots, and it is the communication and the relationships that we have in our lives that really help illuminate and identify for us potential opportunities for us to transform our lives. But sometimes we never get that feedback. So it made me really think about the process of feedback hoarding and really what is it that propels people into this space and decide, you know what, I know feedback is helpful, but I'm going to hold on to it. So a few things I want to highlight. One, sometimes people hold feedback because simply they don't want to hurt the relationship. They may assume that this information may feel so sensitive and hard to retain that it's not worth the risk. So some people do the risk versus reward and say, I don't know that I want to damage the relationship. Now, some people actually lean towards hoarding the feedback versus sharing the feedback because they simply are honestly unskilled. I mean, let's be honest. Like I said, we haven't really had conversations or a lot of practice courageously sharing our thoughts and opinions about where people can really tweak or enhance, or really just show them what I call the mirror. I like to show the mirror, just play back what I saw and let the other person decide what they'd like to do with that. But if we are unskilled, we are less likely to share feedback with others. For some have told me, well, you know, Shanita, the reason why I hoard on the feedback is because it's none of my business. Have you ever felt that way? Have you ever seen something and thought, I could share, I don't know if they know this, maybe I can share it with them, and then you paused and thought, maybe it's not even any of my business. Maybe it's not my place. I don't have either the relationship or the authority. Look at that word, authority, to give someone feedback. Sometimes people feel like you have to have some formal reporting structure in place in order to provide somebody with developmental information. I'd like to challenge you to think about that, because we all have the authority to communicate, to inspire, to share, to nurture, and grow. But sometimes it is really easy to say, hey, it's not my job. Someone else will tell them. Now, here's the thing. I think some people also just simply want to avoid conflict. I'll be honest. I'm an accommodating personality. I like harmony. I'm a Cancer, okay? I'm a crab, water sign. I like harmony. And so oftentimes, I really do. I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to create waves. I like to keep it in a space where everyone can get along. And if there is the perception that there could be a potential ripple, that there could be a conflict, sometimes we just simply avoid it. I mean, let's be honest. There's a lot going on in the world right now. So some of us just say, I just want to avoid it at all costs. Lastly, the other reason why I think people maybe lean into being a feedback hoarder is because they assume that the other person just doesn't care. Now, that last one to me is really, really powerful, because if I go back to the question I asked you at the beginning, you could see the power of that thought. I asked you at the beginning of this, if someone had feedback for you, would you want them to hold on to it, or would you want them to give it to you? I think we would all say, for the most part, I want to know. I want that information. I don't want to have a blind spot and continue through my career not knowing something that you have amazing insights into. So, then what do we do about this? We know that feedback hoarding is a natural tendency. So how do we do this? Because to me, it feels like there's a tension. It's easy to feedback hoard and hold on to the information I have for you, but watching someone not necessarily live out their full potential because of this little bit of information is also a heavy weight to bear. So I have a story that I want to share with you that might help illuminate this. So some of you may or may not know, I've been in employee development, talent management space for a little over 15 years. Early in my career, during some of my very early training classes, I recall an individual who came into my training. He was changing careers. He was mid-career, mature, wise, lots of experience. And he had come into my training classroom pretty transparent that he was changing careers and starting new and needed a fresh start. The way I set up my classrooms, it's really important. I call them feedback rich. You know that feeling as a new hire when you come in and you really just simply want to kill it. You want to do amazing. You really want to prove that you have what it takes to do the job. And honestly, when I'm leading a training classroom, I consider it my responsibility to give them everything they need to be successful. And that includes feedback. In my sessions, I would always say, I'm going to show you the mirror. That's my job. In the classroom, I'm going to be paying attention to all of the great things, but also try and identify the things that we can lean into to help you improve. The only way I'm going to do that is to take some time out and speak with you and show you the mirror, allow you to look at yourself through my eyes. Well, this gentleman was really excited. He was all in. 2 days into the training, there were some behaviors that I wanted to give him some feedback on. I honestly wasn't extremely concerned. I just wanted to show him the mirror and give him the feedback that was on my mind. I remember asking the gentleman to meet with me and to really just kind of talk a little bit about how he thought the training experience was going. What happened next was really eye-opening. I shared with him, he shared that he thought everything was going great and it was perfect. And I shared with him that while things were going great, there was an area of opportunity that we were going to lean into and that I was happy to support him. Now, this gentleman, probably 20, 30 years, my senior, great, amazing person. In this moment, I could see his feeling and his energy start to shift. Something was going on. Suddenly, I actually saw a tear drop from his eye. A few, actually. His eyes started to well up and he got a little emotional. And I'm telling you, I wanted to hoard that feedback. This was early in my career and I was like, oh, this is like the most uncomfortable part of my job. But then I realized it was the most important part of my job, because this gentleman had shared with me that while it was extremely uncomfortable to hear the feedback that I was giving to him, he actually turned the conversation to a much broader scope. He looked at me and he said, "I really appreciate you taking the time to share this with me." He said, "But I wonder if this is why I wasn't able to move up after all these years at my last company." When he said that, it made me really, really pause. Now, I didn't know his performance at his previous company. I don't know what the culture was like. I don't know what his supervisor was like or what the environment was. But it was clear this gentleman had not been given the opportunity to share, to hear feedback on his performance. Now, it could be, right? Think back to some of the reasons why I told you people hoard. They maybe wanted to avoid conflict. Maybe they thought it wasn't their lane. Maybe they thought he wouldn't care or implement it. Or maybe they just thought, it would damage the relationship. But here he was years later in my training classroom, hearing feedback from me that he actually should have probably heard from so many other people years before me. When I talk about feedback hoarding, it's personal for me, because that gentleman, while he came in my class and he did the best that he could, I could tell that the fact that I had given him feedback probably for the first time in years really had a hard time. So I'm not sure where he is today, but I hope that insight and a little piece of information helped him in his career to really think about what he wanted to do with it. Because feedback is a form of empowerment. When you give someone information, you empower them to make informed decisions about their lives. Yeah, they don't have to take your feedback, but goodness, what if they could have done some amazing things with it and never could, simply because they didn't have access to it? So I wanted to share that story with you as I talk about and you reflect on feedback hoarding. It's so easy to hold on to it, but the impact can be really, really great. So then, what can we do if we were in a space where we wanted to provide feedback? What are some of the things, the key questions you should ask yourself to know if this is something I really, really should share? So I have 3 things that you should ask yourself if you find yourself with some information that you're holding that you think, am I hoarding, or is this a moment to deliver? So the first thing you should ask yourself when you find yourself in a space of a feedback hoarding position is, could this help them? Simple question, but powerful. Does this information have the potential to help them make a decision in their life, change a behavior in their life, make changes in their life for the better? If you can answer that question honestly and say, is what I'm about to share potentially transformational? That's a good kind of gut check for you to see whether or not you should give the feedback. The second thing that you could ask yourself is, not only will this help them, but could this impact their future? So taking yourself out of the immediate situation and thinking longer term about this individual really helps you really think about, all right, is this something I should share? So leaning in a little bit and thinking, could this impact their future? Could this potentially change the trajectory of their life? Could it potentially open up doors that they never knew? If they just had the insight that I had. Those 2 questions and those alone are enough to help you make that decision. But the last question that I think is really powerful is, if it were me, would I want this information? Now that is a powerful question. If you're on the fence about whether or not you should give the information, you ask yourself that and you're going to find yourself in a position where you say, you know what, I need to give it. So 3 questions you ask yourself if you find yourself in a space of, I don't know if I should share this information. 1, could this help them? 2, will it impact their future? And 3, if it were me, would I want this information? I hope that with just those 3 questions, it helps you start to change the lens with which you look at your desire and ability to pass on the feedback. Now, the last thing before I let you go for this evening, I wanted to share just a few things to keep in mind as you start to identify the type of feedback that you want to provide. Now, there's a ton of feedback that you can give. You can give technical feedback, you can give developmental feedback, you can give reinforcing feedback, you can give positive feedback. There's so many different things you can give. So as you try to categorize, what is the essence of this message? Some of the things that you want to kind of think about, there's 4 kind of pieces that I keep in mind as I think about, okay, who am I in relationship to this person, and how does this feedback really sit and fit in their life? So the first thing I think about is the source. Get really clear about who they are to me and who I am to them. If this is a person that I have an established, trusted relationship with, it's a no-brainer. I need to lean into this. I have a relationship with this person. I'm going to see them as ongoing. I definitely want to make sure that I'm really clear that this is an important relationship to me. But in addition, perhaps you're not someone that I interact with all the time, but our relationship is unique in nature. Perhaps we have an acquaintance relationship or professional relationship. It's important that you really take the time to think about who you are in relationship to that person and the value that they may receive from hearing this message from you. I also think it's important to think about impact. How big of a deal is this? What is the impact of this? Is this nitpicky? Is this personal? Is it just my preference? Or is this something that has the power to change, again, like I said, the trajectory of someone's life? Maybe it's something that is cascading through several areas of their life. Maybe it's something that has a reach and a scope so wide that if you did give them this little tidbit of information, they would see change in their spiritual life, financial life, personal life, academic life, right? Their relationships. Impact is important. It helps you really just kind of center your mind on kind of really the value of what you're going to share. The third thing that I think you should think about is the frequency. Sometimes, has this ever happened to you guys? Sometimes you make a mistake. We all do. Mistakes are a part of the growth process. And really, anytime you make a mistake, you're really just facilitating learning. So I love making a mistake because I learn something new every time. But when we think about the frequency of what you're going to share with them, it's important for you to kind of capture that in your mind. Really think about it. How often is this behavior or this thing showing up in your life, in their life? Is it just one thing? It was a fluke? It was an accident? That's a little different than something that is trending. That's a pattern. That's a repeated behavior that is in their subconscious in a way that they clearly cannot comprehend or don't have the ability to see. It's a difference. But sometimes I've seen people who lean into just the one-offs. Oops, I made a mistake. Oops, my live, I forgot to do XYZ. And it's like all this feedback about one little tiny thing that I actually taught myself already. When you look at repeating behaviors and those trends, it helps you really think about, it helps to reinforce for you, hey, the value of the information you are going to share. And the last thing to keep in mind are the trends. What are the trends over time and how are these things showing up and manifesting in their life? If you have a piece of feedback for someone and you take some time to think through those things, you're absolutely going to be in a much better place to share the feedback than if you were just going to say it off the cuff or not say it at all. Now, I am a proponent of feedback, but I know it's not necessarily easy to do, right? To share. But I want to take some time and really hear from you guys. When you think about being a feedback hoarder, what's on your mind and what are some of the things or tips that you think are important to keep in mind? I have a comment here. Question about intent. I love this question, guys. So the question I just got was, does intent matter? Does motivation behind your decision matter? Thank you so much for bringing that up. That's incredible. It's actually one of the number one things to keep in the back of your mind. Motivation is everything. If your motivation is to help, to inspire, to encourage, to show, to inform, to support. All of those are good intentions. But if you find yourself in a space with an intent to cut down, to call out, to clap back, to put people in their place, to embarrass, to, right? That's not the right motive we want to have when we are giving feedback. So I love that. Thank you so much for that comment. Intention is so important. And before you step into a space to delivering feedback, you want to pause and always check your intention. So thank you guys so much for taking the time today on this Friday, going into a nice long weekend. I hope these tips around feedback hoarding was helpful for you. Keep in mind, feedback hoarding is the process of intentionally withdrawing and withholding important feedback from someone, and that you have to ask yourself a few key questions to challenge yourself to share that information with the best of intentions possible. Thank you guys so much for joining me for Feedback Friday. I hope to see you next Friday as we explore another topic in feedback. Thanks so much. Take care.